Picture this. A massive dragon's breath of blue flame erupts in a workshop, but there's no mythical beast in sight. Instead, standing triumphantly is a Swedish inventor who would change the industrial world forever. The year is 1882, and Carl Richard Nyberg has just created something that would literally put fire at humanity's fingertips. Before Nyberg, controlling intense flame was a dangerous dance with death. After him, well, that's a story of genius that history nearly forgot. Born in 1858 in the small village of Arboga, Sweden, Carl Richard Nyberg's early life was far from the flames of success. The son of a carpenter in a time when Sweden was still finding its industrial footing, young Carl seemed destined for a life of simple trade work. But beneath his humble exterior burned an insatiable curiosity that would later ignite a revolution. At just 14, he began his apprenticeship as a mechanical engineer at the Swedish State Railway's central workshop, a position that would prove to be the spark that lit his future path. But unlike many success stories of the era, Nyberg's journey wasn't a straight shot to the top. His early years were marked by countless hours of observation, learning how machines worked, and most importantly, identifying their limitations. In the railway's workshop, surrounded by the constant clanging of metal and hiss of steam, Nyberg developed an intimate understanding of industrial needs that most inventors of his time lacked. He wasn't just creating for creation's sake. He was solving real problems he witnessed firsthand. In the late 1870s, Nyberg faced a problem that would haunt every industrial worker of his era. The existing soldering and welding tools were dangerous, unreliable, and often ineffective. The standard blowtorches of the time were little more than controlled accidents waiting to happen. They leaked, they sputtered, and worst of all, they had an alarming tendency to explode. Nyberg watched as fellow workers suffered burns and injuries from these primitive tools. But the real challenge wasn't just creating a safer torch. It was developing one that could produce a consistently hot, focused flame while being portable enough for practical use. His early prototypes were met with skepticism and even ridicule. "It cannot be done," they said. "If it were possible, someone would have done it already." The technical challenges were immense. How to pressurize the fuel safely, how to control the flame precisely, and how to make it reliable enough for daily industrial use. Each failed attempt cost him precious time and resources. Working late into the night in his modest workshop, Nyberg would often find himself covered in soot, his hands blistered from burns, yet he refused to give up. The solution, he knew, lay in understanding not just the mechanics, but the very nature of flame itself. After years of experimentation, in 1882, Nyberg achieved his breakthrough. His revolutionary blowtorch design incorporated several ingenious features that would change industrial work forever. Unlike previous designs, Nyberg's blowtorch used a unique preheating system that vaporized the fuel before combustion, creating a hotter, more controlled flame. The real genius lay in his pressure regulation system, a seemingly simple but incredibly effective mechanism that prevented the dangerous fuel surges that had plagued earlier designs. The torch's body was carefully engineered to maintain constant pressure, while a cleverly designed nozzle allowed for precise flame control. But, perhaps most importantly, Nyberg's blowtorch was practically foolproof. Workers could now direct intense heat exactly where they needed it, without fear of explosion or injury. The invention was an immediate sensation in industrial circles. Word spread quickly through Sweden's workshops and factories. Here, finally, was a tool that could deliver reliable, controlled heat for soldering, welding, and countless other applications. Nyberg didn't stop at just one version. He continued refining his design, creating different models for various industrial applications. His company, Max Sievert, began producing the blowtorches in significant numbers. And soon, Nyberg's torch became the standard tool across Europe's industrial landscape. The invention was so successful that even today, modern blowtorches still use many of the basic principles he established. Yet despite revolutionizing industrial work, Nyberg's name gradually faded from public memory. Several factors contributed to this historical oversight. First, while his blowtorch was revolutionary, it was primarily an industrial tool, not something that captured the public's imagination like electric lights or automobiles. Second, Nyberg's later years were marked by a series of less successful ventures, particularly his obsession with aviation. His attempts to create a viable aircraft, while showing his innovative spirit, ultimately failed and somewhat overshadowed his earlier triumph. The Flugen, the Fly, his attempted flying machine, never achieved sustained flight despite years of development and significant financial investment. As the 20th century progressed, newer technologies and improvements to his original design meant that the blowtorch became increasingly separated from its inventor's name. While the tool remained essential, few remembered the man who had first tamed the flame. Additionally, being based in Sweden, away from the major industrial centers of Britain, Germany, and America, meant that much of his story remained localized, never gaining the international recognition it deserved. Today, Carl Richard Nyberg's legacy burns brighter than ever. Even if most don't know his name, every time a plumber solders a pipe, every time a jeweler crafts a delicate piece, every time an artist creates a glass sculpture, they're building on Nyberg's innovation. His invention didn't just solve a problem. It opened up new possibilities in countless fields. The principles he established for controlling and directing flame continue to influence modern torch design. But perhaps his greatest legacy isn't the tool itself, but what it represents: the power of practical innovation to solve real-world problems. Nyberg wasn't a privileged scientist working in a well-funded laboratory. He was a worker who saw a problem and refused to accept that it couldn't be solved. His story reminds us that some of the most important innovations come from those who intimately understand the challenges they're trying to overcome. In an age where we celebrate complex digital innovations, Nyberg's story shows us that sometimes the most impactful inventions are those that put power, in this case, quite literally, into people's hands. So the next time you see a blowtorch's controlled blue flame, remember Carl Richard Nyberg, the man who first tamed fire for the industrial age. And if you've enjoyed discovering this forgotten genius, make sure to follow us for more incredible stories of overlooked innovators who changed our world. Let us know in the comments what other forgotten inventors you'd like to learn about. Because history's greatest stories often hide in plain sight, waiting to be rediscovered.